Oh, sorry to interrupt. Could I just ask you one quick, small favor? Could you please subscribe to our channel? The bigger we can grow this online community, the more free online resources like this one we as a pack can provide for you. Thanks so much. Welcome to the latest episode of the PetSap webinar series, and I'm delighted to be joined by Dr. Aubrey Kumm as we talk about happiness, the key to recruitment and retention. Aubrey is a veterinary surgeon and employer brand strategist consultant for the veterinary profession. He obtained his veterinary degree from the University of Pretoria, South Africa in 2000, and subsequently worked as a partner in 2 small animal practices in the United Kingdom. In 2013, he returned to South Africa to pursue an MSc degree in developmental and behavioral neuroscience. Pretty smart guy, which he earned with distinction from the University of Cape Town in 2018. He's also the founder of Guava AI Limited, a veterinary technology company that created Jobs.vet, a specialized recruitment and employer branding platform for the veterinary industry. And he's also just a good mate of mine. So welcome, Aubrey. I'm super excited to see your presentation, just like everyone else here. I'll hand over to you, and I'll be back on the end to ask everyone's questions. So if you do have questions as you're listening to Aubrey, please drop them either in the chat or the Q&A, and I'll pick those up with him at the end. Over to you, Aubrey.
Okay, well, thanks for that introduction, Tom. I believe everybody can see my screen. I hope so. Also, thanks to PetSap, all you guys at PetSap, for making it possible for me to be part of the webinar series and to give this talk today. And of course, thanks to you all for attending this webinar about happiness and why I believe it is the key to successful recruiting and retention. Now, this photo you can see over here is from a Debenham veterinary practice in Suffolk, here in the UK, where I had the privilege of helping out as a relief vet some 2 years ago now, I think. And the one thing that I realized while working there, and also the main reason why I stayed there for much longer than I initially intended to, was that it is truly a happy place to work. It is a beautiful practice in a lovely village, and I was working with a great team and for amazing owners. So today, I will be talking about the power of happiness at work. I'm going to begin by first briefly touching on the current state of veterinary recruitment and retention from a global perspective. Then I will be talking a bit about the brain science of happiness, about the effects that happiness and stress have on the brain, and the brain chemicals responsible for these feelings of happiness and stress. And then I will end by explaining why happiness at work is key for both getting top talent to choose you rather than any other practice, and also choose to stay rather than go. Okay, so let's kick off with the current state of veterinary recruitment and retention. Okay, this is a quote by Stephen Eidelman, who is the co-founder and chief executive officer of the startup veterinary hospital group Modern Animal. Obviously they're in the US. And it's taken from an interview with him that appeared in Forbes magazine in August last year. Now, most of us will agree with Steve that the biggest challenge facing veterinary practice owners today is recruiting vets and nurses. Recruiting veterinary professionals today is much tougher than it ever was. It takes much longer, costs much more, and fewer candidates apply. Now, looking at data, now I made this little graph myself using these data, but looking at the data published in the UK, in Australia, and in South Africa, filling a vacant vet position typically takes between 3 and 4 months. Now, I couldn't find specific data for the US, but anecdotally, at least, I think the situation appears to be very similar over there. So most employers find it difficult or very difficult to fill their vacant vet position, while for some, it's just nearly impossible. Okay, on average, veterinary teams must cope with around 40 days of being understaffed when somebody leaves. Now, this often leads to increased workload, increased workplace stress, fatigue, and of course, potentially burnout. Now, there are, of course, many contributing factors to the time it takes to fill a job opening, the geographic location of the hospital, for example, and of course, there not being enough vets and nurses to go around. So the British Equine Veterinary Association and the British Small Animal Veterinary Association published the result of their recruitment and retention survey in 2020. And they found that 43% of vets and 50% of vet nurses were planning to find a new job. Now, very few, in fact, were thinking of leaving the profession altogether. Mostly, it seems that they just wanted to work for someone else. McKinsey, incidentally, did a similar study to investigate what the main reasons were behind the Great Resignation, remember, during COVID. And they too found that approximately 40% of respondents at that time indicated that they were planning to find a new job in the not too distant future. Right. Now, of course, there is a very big difference between what people say they are going to do and what they actually end up doing. And here you can see a graph published by the AVMA, and they use data from AHA and also from the National Healthcare and Retention, or the National Healthcare and Retention Report. And these data seem to suggest that in the US, veterinary turnover, or churn, is more than double that of medical doctors, and that's around 16%, and that veterinary nurse turnover, or churn, is significantly higher than that of human nurses at around 25%. Now, for the UK, I was unable to find data on veterinary employee turnover or churn, but again, anecdotally, I think if I remember, it sits somewhere between 10 and 15%. So we know that people leave their employers, that there are more jobs out there than there are candidates to fill them. In fact, there are, if I remember correctly, around 18 jobs per DVM and 6 jobs per vet nurse or vet tech available at any time in the US. And that, of course, makes it increasingly difficult to recruit. Now, if we go back 20 or 30 years or so, the model of recruiting was much more simple. You simply placed a job ad in your favorite veterinary journal or pin it to the jobs board at a veterinary conference and wait for the resumes to arrive a week or so later. So employers used to be in the driver's seat. Back then, of course, they would advertise job vacancies, typically using 75 words or less, providing only the information that they thought was sufficient for job seekers to decide whether they could apply for the job or not. Job seekers would then scan the job pages for any jobs that looked even remotely relevant, despite the very limited information, and then mail the employer a complete record of their life achievements, obviously in the hope of landing a job. But of course, then the internet happened. Now the candidates are calling the shots. So we have moved on from the age of information disparity, in which employers held the balance of information about the jobs they advertise, and we've entered the age of the modern informed candidate. Now, they spend at least 6 hours accessing 14 to 15 different sources of information to research every job opportunity they're interested in before they even consider applying. So they do this online, they access review sites, social media pages, of course, and your hospital website. They speak to their friends, colleagues, and social network connections, and they may even visit your practice as a client to find out everything there is to know about the job. They want to know who they will be working for, who they will be working with, and why they should choose to work for you. And they are spoiled for choice. Now, look, veterinary candidates do not need to find a job. They simply need to weed out all those jobs that they would never take. So they have more information and more choice. And of course, this means more consideration and more time. So why do they spend all this time and effort researching each job opportunity? Well, because they want to know what it's really like to work at your hospital. They want to be sure that they'll be happy there. And that makes perfect sense because, as I will explain a little bit later, we are wired for wanting happiness. Unfortunately, if Gallup's state of the global workplace for 2023 is to be believed, folks are not happy at work. In fact, 60% of people are emotionally detached at work, and 19% are just plain miserable. Now, on the left here is a study done by George McCarran at the London School of Economics. Now, they developed a mobile app to measure happiness. This was a few years ago, and they managed to get over 4 million responses from around 66,000 respondents in the UK. Now, I spoke to him on the phone a couple of weeks ago, and he said initially, because it was for his PhD, initially he thought they'd be lucky if they had about 100 respondents. Anyway, so people downloaded the app from the Apple App Store. It wasn't available on Android, so of course the data is obviously skewed to people who own iPhones. Well, that said, these folks received push notifications at random times during the day or week, and then were given around 60 minutes to respond for their data to be included in the study. And they were asked to select from a list of activities what they were doing, where they were, who they were with, and then using a sliding scale, they had to indicate how happy they were at that moment, ranging from not at all to extremely happy. And I don't know if you can see clearly, but the results suggest that people are most happy when they are being intimate, and least happy by quite a big margin when they are sick in bed. Now, I'm sure you can see there that being sick in bed is the only thing we find worse than being at work. We also don't like commuting, being in meetings, waiting in queues. And of course, these are all the things typically associated with work or around work. So what does this all tell us? That work sucks, okay? Just arriving at work means you're already at -10 on the happiness scale. So how can we make work suck less? Is feeling happier at work even possible? What does happiness at work mean? Why is it important? And how can it be achieved? Well, I hope to shed some light at least on that today. So here's the thing. While I agree with Steve that the biggest challenge facing veterinary practices today is recruiting vets and nurses, and that it has indeed become increasingly difficult to fill veterinary job openings, I disagree that this is a problem every veterinary employer is facing today. There are at least some hospital owners for whom recruiting vets and vet nurses simply is not difficult at all. So there are practices out there that seldomly recruit because the folks who work, they tend to stay rather than leave, and they regularly receive many unsolicited job applications from top candidates who'd love to come and work for them. So these are that's the 5% of practices or practice owners is there on the left side of the graph. And also interestingly, that the people who work there can't wait to tell their friends as soon as a job becomes available. So they hardly ever have to advertise. And when they do, they're never short of applications from top candidates. Okay, so what makes employees want to leave? So here we have a very simple representation of employee experience mapped over time. Essentially, this is more or less what our career looks like. With more experience comes more responsibility. Work becomes a bit more challenging, and that, of course, is a good thing. We like a challenge; otherwise, work would just be boring. Now, of course, there are days that are less challenging and less stressful, and then there are days that are more challenging and more stressful. But as long as our experience at work remains within the margins of our expectation, in other words, how we expect our experience at work to be, that's okay. This expectation is typically set by what we know about the job, the promises made by the employer, about the management style, workplace culture, say caseloads, work hours, mentorship, and so on. In other words, what the employee will receive in return for the skills, capabilities, and experience that they bring to the business. Now, I'm sure you've heard of this before because it's often referred to as the employee value proposition or the mutual value exchange. But given the beast that is veterinary clinical practice, and I've been involved in this for 23 years now, occasionally our workday experience is such that it strays outside of this expectation margin into the area of tolerance. And we may think, wait, hang on, this is not what I expected. This is not what I signed up for. This is certainly not what I want to put up with long term. But I will tolerate it for a short period of time because this is a great place to work. I work with people I really love and respect, and it's good for my career to work here. So I just need to get through this and things will be fine. Now, we've experienced many of these days, or days like this at least, during the challenging times brought on by COVID. Another example I can think of may be the new grad having to deal with challenging cases without the necessary support from experienced colleagues or even an experienced vet promise training, support, and mentorship to progress their skills, and they end up doing lots of routine stuff like neuters and vaccinations. Now, and that's okay when you have a reputation as a great place to work, because your reputation determines employee staying power, their loyalty, and also their willingness to support your business during more turbulent times. However, when the employee experience lives outside of this margin of expectation for long periods of time, that's when we're in trouble. Employee stress levels are high. They may feel overworked and underappreciated. They are unhappy. Their clients are unhappy. And again, they may be at risk of burnout. Now, this is often what we see or what we find when there is a change in ownership of the practice or in management style and, of course, workplace culture. And after some time, employees reach their breaking point and they decide to move on to a better job elsewhere. Now, this is the 15% of vets and the 20% of veterinary nurses I mentioned earlier when I talked about the employee churn or turnover. Now, this, of course, is far fewer than the 40 to 50% who said that they were planning on leaving. Now, those folks, the one who stay despite wanting to leave, are the employees Gallup referred to as the non-engaged and disengaged, also known as the quiet quitters. Okay, so we know that work sucks, and that for some folks, it sucks so much that they leave, while others simply check out, making sure that they just do enough work to not get fired. So when I speak to hospital owners about employer brand strategy, I always ask them what they want their reputation to be. what they want to be famous for. And oftentimes this is what they say, words like they want to be known for their great culture, they want to be the most attractive employer, best veterinary employer, or veterinary employer of choice. But this is simply too vague. It's just too vanilla. Now, we must, just think for yourself or answer this. So employer of choice, or most attractive employer, but for who? It's like Disney. It's a magical place if you don't mind long queues and overpriced junk food, of course, or camping out in the middle of nowhere. Now, for some folks, that's a dream holiday, and for others, it's the theme of their nightmares. We need to be more specific, so a more tangible reputation that will grab the attention of potential candidates. And this is why we need to understand what it is that makes people happy. All right, so let's try and do that. So to define and understand happiness, we need to dip our toes into the science of neurochemistry. And I hope this is not too sciencey, because obviously I love this, but it may be a bit boring for some. But the brain produces 4 chemicals that are linked to happiness, and these are obviously known as the happy hormones. And they are dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. And they each are released for different reasons, which I'll talk about a little bit later. Together, these happy hormones are responsible for what I call the subconscious drivers of work. Actually, it's much more than that. It's what makes life worth living. And they are a sense of purpose, a sense of impact, and a sense of belonging. So we can define happiness as a state of well-being and contentment, achieved by a sense of impact, purpose, and belonging, driven by the happy hormones, dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and the endorphins. Now, I'm sure you're all familiar with the name Francis Crick. He was one of the folks responsible for our understanding of the molecular structure of DNA. Well, in 1994, he published a book with the title, The Astonishing Hypothesis, The Scientific Search for the Soul. In which he suggested that we, our sense of self, our joys and sorrows and fears and ambitions and so on, can all be explained by the behavior of this vast and decidedly complex network of brain cells and their associated molecules. And there's a growing body of neuroscientific evidence that supports this hypothesis. Okay, so the sense of purpose. Now, a sense of purpose is the feeling that your life has meaning. You have something worthwhile to achieve, a goal to focus your attention and efforts on, a reason why you exist. Now, driven by serotonin, this neurotransmitter makes us strive for status and recognition. So whenever we do something that raises our status or gets us recognition for something we've achieved, our brain rewards us by delivering a little squirt of serotonin, and we feel the swell of pride in our chest. Now, for example, some of you may remember your white coat ceremony, that rite of passage for vet students in the US when they transition from preclinical to clinical students, or when you received your DVM degree and you earned the title of doctor. So that sense of pride you experience is serotonin at work, rewarding you for the status and the recognition you've earned with all your hard work. Now, interestingly, serotonin is also a pro-social brain chemical. So it also rewards us for being an integral part of a group or a team working together to achieve higher status, like achieving AHA or fear-free accreditation for your hospital, for example. But when it comes to work, our work, the most basic definition of purpose is how we answer the why question. So why do we do what we do? And the answer lies in whether we see work as a job, a career, or a calling. Now, people with jobs see work as a necessity of life. They work for pay. They will gladly switch jobs for more pay. They can't wait to retire, and they wouldn't encourage their friends or children to follow in their footsteps. Those folks who see their work as a career are usually more focused on advancement, in other words, being promoted, and of course, earning more money. But it's the people who see work as a calling who find it most satisfying. For them, work is a very important part of life. It's part of their identity. They believe what they do matters, and they typically encourage others to do the same work. Being a vet or a vet nurse, vet tech, is, according, our greatest source of satisfaction. When we feel most useful, most important, and most skilled is when we treat animals. Driven by dopamine, a sense of impact is that feeling that you are making a difference. Now, the evolutionary purpose of dopamine was to incentivize beneficial behaviors. And dopamine is released when we anticipate reward. In more primitive times, the anticipation of food, for example, would give us a little dopamine buzz, motivating us to forage further or be more ambitious when we are out hunting for food. So dopamine motivates us to put in more effort by fueling specific goal-directed behaviors to gain that anticipated reward. Someone, I don't know who, was once quoted saying, life is about making an impact, not making an income. Well, I think that's a bit silly because making an impact does not pay the bills. But I think what it means, particularly in our profession, of course, is that the reward isn't mainly financial. The real reward is seeing the impact we have and the difference we make in the lives of people and their pets, of course. Okay, so what about the endorphins, just quickly? Well, while dopamine motivates us to put in more effort by fueling those goal-directed behaviors to gain the anticipated reward, the endorphins are there to numb the pain along the way, and adrenaline provides that extra burst of energy we need to push through. Okay, and finally, a sense of belonging, a feeling of being part of a group with shared values, common goals, interests, and beliefs. Essentially, we humans are social mammals. That's why we reward pro-social behavior and punish antisocial behavior. Now, without this sense of belonging, we feel alone or like imposters. And this obviously causes feelings of unhappiness and stress. Belonging, on the other hand, being part of a group means safety. So you've often heard people say that they love working somewhere because they feel part of a family, part of a team. And this is because oxytocin, also known as the bonding molecule, drives and rewards relationship and attachment. Now, our relationship with oxytocin begins very early in life, typically when mom and baby have that first skin-on-skin contact that releases oxytocin, and the parent-child bond is set for life. Now, here's something that I found very interesting, and that's that sometime in the past 50,000 years or so, humans and domesticated wolves evolved a whole new response to oxytocin. So when a dog and its owner, not a stranger, interact, they both secrete oxytocin. And the more time they spend looking at each other, the more oxytocin is released. Now, if we give dogs oxytocin, they tend to look at their humans for longer, raising their humans' oxytocin in turn, and this is the human-animal bond that makes working as a companion animal vet possible and profitable. No talk is complete without at least one Venn diagram. I personally love Venn diagrams because in any good Venn diagram, it's at the intersections where the interesting and the fascinating can be found. And here we find the conscious drivers of work: mastery, citizenship, and culture. Now, ask any person what they want from their next job, and whatever the answer is, you'll be able to put it in one of these buckets. Mastery, becoming, oh, hang on, just go back. Okay. Right. I've sort of completely lost where I am. There we go. So mastery, becoming more confident with the work that we do, progressing from where I am professionally today to where I want to be tomorrow. Now, Remember our sense of purpose, driven by serotonin, the neurotransmitter that drives our desire for status, recognition, and accomplishment? Well, it turns out that serotonin also enhances the effects of dopamine, or specifically dopamine's goal-directed behavior. So working together, these two brain chemicals drive our ambition to become more confident. Citizenship, now that's particularly important for the millennials and Gen Z, who today, by the way, make up the biggest demographic of the workforce. They want to make the world a better place. Dopamine, the motivation chemical, together with oxytocin, the pro-social brain chemical, is the driving force behind our desire to make a positive impact in the communities where we live and also where we work. Now, here in the UK, for example, we have Street Vet. It's a charity with hundreds of vets and nurses who volunteer to make the world a better place for homeless pet owners and their pets. Now, there are many vets and vet nurses who prefer to work for shelters and charities. That is fairly common. It's even a specialty now. Another example, which is quite recent, is practices being awarded certified B Corporation status. Now, these businesses undergo a rigorous certification process where they have to prove their social and also environmental contributions. And finally, a workplace culture where we can feel at home, part of a group with the same purpose, values, and beliefs, and that's driven by the pro-social brain chemicals, serotonin and oxytocin. Right, so now we know what it is that makes us happy at work, the subconscious drivers of work, sense of purpose, impact, and belonging, driven by the happy hormones, working together to give us these conscious drivers for the work we do. Now, obviously, that's not the same for everyone. The folks in research and academia may be a bit more influenced by the serotonin receptors. Our colleagues in emergency medicine and surgery, or trauma surgeons, are more likely to crave the effects of dopamine, adrenaline, and the endorphins. And like I just said, some vets and nurses prefer to work for charities or shelters because they want to make a difference in their communities in that way. And while there are definitely others for whom a culture where they can feel they belong and they fit in is the most important to be truly happy at work. Right, so now we've talked about the things that make us feel good. Next, we need to change gears a bit and talk about the things that make us feel bad or stressed. So the basic stress response is physiologically ancient. So we find it in fish, reptiles, birds, and mammals, and it's driven by the glucocorticoids or cortisol in the case of humans, and of course, adrenaline. A stressor is anything that disrupts the body's homeostasis or physiological balance. You know, the things like heart rate, blood pressure, body temperature, and blood glucose levels, and so on. Now, the stress response is crucial for survival. It evolved to help us get through periods of crisis, you know, the famous fight, flight, or freeze response, and then re-establishing homeostasis or the physiological balance once things have calmed down. What is not ancient, however, is how stress works in the smart, socially sophisticated, and recently evolved mammal, which is you and me. Unlike any other mammal on Earth, in addition to physical stresses, we also have psychological stresses. And the stress response did not evolve to deal with this very recent human invention. So we have a problem. If you're stressed like a normal mammal in acute physical crisis, say like an antelope being chased by a hungry lion, the stress response is life-saving. It rapidly mobilizes glucose from storage sites, increases heart rate and blood pressure to ensure that there's enough energy available to the muscle so you can run like hell. And it makes total sense, of course, then also that the normal body maintenance processes like digestion, tissue repair, reproduction, and so on, be put on hold while you run for your life. But when this occurs all the time because of psychological stresses, our health suffers, both mentally and physically. That's when we're at risk of developing diabetes, high blood pressure, hypertension, and also reproductive problems, just to name but a few. Cortisol also has a negative effect on the happy hormones, making us feel depressed, unmotivated, and these are the reasons why chronic stress often leads to more sick days. Now, sustained stress also disrupts our decision-making capabilities, our impulse control, sense of empathy, and also our pro-social behaviors. So stress not only increases absenteeism, it also impacts our productivity and makes us not nice to work with. Now, ask anybody why they are leaving, what is thinking or considering leaving their current job, and whatever the answer is, you'll be able to put it in one of these buckets. So financial stress, physical stress, emotional stress, and then a sense of autonomy. Financial stresses, so things like not being paid enough or not being paid fairly. Physical stresses, being overworked, leading to emotional and cognitive fatigue. Remember, we make more mistakes when we're tired. Emotional stresses like a toxic work environment or lack of support, causing us to have feelings of anxiety, and then also a lack of autonomy or a sense of agency. Now, this is when we are micromanaged or we have no control of the time spent working or our workload, and so on. Now, these are just a few examples, but whatever you ask, typically we could put it in one of these buckets. So here is my conceptual model of what a happy workplace looks like. Financial, physical, and emotional well-being and a sense of autonomy means we experience far less psychological stress, have lower cortisol levels. This obviously leads to improved physical and mental health, which in turn makes us more productive and more pleasant to be around. Doing work that is meaningful as part of a team and getting better at it along the way feels good, makes us happy, releasing those happy hormones, which, by the way, also reduces the effects of cortisol. So being happy at work, experiencing a state of well-being and contentment simply means that we're not worrying about home when we're at work, and we're not worrying about work when we're at home. And this is my definition of work-life balance, by the way. Okay, so why is this important? Peter Drucker, regarded by many economists as the father of modern business management, famously said, the purpose of a business is to create and keep a customer. And how do businesses create customers? Through innovation, like Pet's app, for example, and effective marketing, of course. And they keep customers by providing a service or product that is consistently better than that of their competitors. Essentially, it means making customers happy, so they go and tell their friends how great you are. Now, Roger Martin, a well-known or a world-renowned business strategist, said that we must see, and I agree with this, that we must see our employees as customers because they are the customer of our job. And like any customer, they pay. Our employees have chosen to buy our job. And what did they buy it with? A slice of their life, a slice they can never get back. So for us to create, in other words, attract and keep, in other words, retain our employees, we must put in the same effort we do to attract and keep our clients. And this is important because happy employees are the single greatest competitive advantage in business today. And here's why. So, all those conversations we have about work, the people we work for and work with, when we attend conferences or CE events or in private Facebook groups or on LinkedIn or review platforms or Google reviews, well, that is where the perception people have about what it must be like to work for you is formed. And happy employees means you'll have a reputation as a great employer and your practice as a desirable place to work. Now, that's the very definition of an employer of choice. And this means that the best candidates will actively seek you out for job opportunities when they are looking. Now, typically, having a reputation as a great place to work means twice as many candidates in half the time and, of course, at half the cost when compared to the average practice. Even more important, though, happy employees tend to not leave. A great workplace, working with highly skilled, happy, and fully engaged colleagues is a place where employees want to stay. No secret too that happy, engaged employees are more productive. They provide better service, and this means more happy clients who tell their family and friends about how awesome your practice is. And this, of course, means you get even more clients, which is good for business. Now, having a competitive advantage means that it was an easy decision to choose your practice rather than the practice down the road. This is what a no-brainer decision means, and we like no-brainers, don't we? So, because to a scary degree, we are not the rational geniuses we like to believe we are. You see, the brain requires a massive amount of energy to operate properly. In fact, the average adult human brain represents about 2% of body weight, yet it accounts for about 20% of the body's energy expenditure. Thinking uses a lot of energy. So to conserve energy, our brain has evolved to favor not thinking over thinking. Daniel Kahneman famously said that thinking is to humans like swimming is to cats. We try to avoid it. So evolution has provided our brains with a shortcut. If it feels good, go towards it, mediated by the happy hormones. If it feels bad, move away, mediated by the stress hormones. Okay, so if you have happy employees, they will tell their friends or talk about it at on social media or at meetings. And this means you have a reputation as a great employer because people will obviously like what you have to offer. That's the proposition. And because they experience it all at all different touch points or interactions they have with your practice. It becomes a no-brainer to choose you, and we like no-brainers, and that is the very definition of competitive advantage. Okay, so I just put this slide in to give you just an example of what I mean by all these touch points, and specifically with regards to the employee experience, which we divide in 4 main sections or periods. First is the candidate experience. Okay, so this is when folks start looking for a job or interested in moving elsewhere, and the touch points here are they obviously go and check out your research, your social media content. When they're at conferences, they listen to what other folks have to say about your practice. We talk about who we work for and who we work with and how great it is and things we like and don't like. Obviously, if you've received any reward, they go and check your Google reviews. What clients complain about and how you respond to those complaints. They go and check out your practice website. And do you have a practice website? There are still practices who don't have a practice website, only Facebook pages. They also go and check out your job advert. Now, there's this thing in nature, and it's called costly signaling or costly signaling theory. And that is, if you put a lot of effort and time and money and these resources into good ads, it means you could obviously be a good employer. So it's a bit of a bias, a bit of a shortcut, but that's called costly signaling theory. So your adverts are important. And then obviously the application process as well. We know that if the application process is too difficult, people just drop off. That's research done by Monster, Indeed, and LinkedIn, I think, as well. And then interviews, how easy was the interviews? How did you make it easy for an interview to be booked? Were you on time? All these things is an experience that people will talk about. Then we have the onboarding experience. This may be the offer letter. Interesting. It's becoming more popular for offer video rather than offer letter to be sent. The employment contract. Now, some of these restrictive covenants that we typically find or used to find in employee contracts are becoming a bit more of a no-no. Uniform or swag. So. Interesting, I saw a practice who just after the employee, the engagement letter was sent or the offer letter was sent and this was accepted, they sent the uniform and some practice swag to the person who decided to join the practice. And this was opened and this, hit the social media like you can imagine it does. Then this is followed by the employee experience. This is where you basically make good on the promise that you made when you offered the job, so support, CPD, workplace culture, paid time off, and so on. And then very importantly, because at some time people will move on to their next job, is that you need to be a great place to be from. Happy employees will go and tell other folks that it's great to work there, and that's being a great place to work from. So they become your best advocates. Also, what we see is that they come back. They come back to great workplaces, the so-called boomerangs. Okay, so I'm going to end with one more quote by Peter Drucker before I show you just a few examples of how employers use these characteristics of the subconscious and conscious drivers of work to attract and keep top candidates. And that is this: the most valuable assets of the 20th century company were its production equipment. The most valuable asset of the 21st century institution, whether business or non-business, will be its knowledge workers and their productivity. Now, the veterinary profession is part of the knowledge economy, where the unit of production is the knowledge and skill of the professional. We use the muscle between our ears, not so much the muscles in our arms, legs, and back. And in this part of the economy, happiness is the key to success. Okay, so just a few quick examples. This is a practice here in the UK, Penard Vets, and they've been in the news over the past few years or so, because firstly, they were the first practice that is completely employee-owned. I think they are now more, it's a little group of practices privately owned by employees, and also B Corp. So they were the first practice in Europe to get the B Corp certification. In other words, so for them, their main theme here is citizenship. So they want to make the world a better place for the communities they serve and where they work, and also for the folks who work for them. But I'm going to see if I can play this video I found on Modern Animals jobs page. And I won't play the whole thing, but just try to identify the main theme here, whether it's citizenship, culture, or mastery.
I would say that the profession has not evolved tremendously with respect to technology. In human healthcare, it's pretty common to have an app or access to your medical records. That hasn't been the way in veterinary medicine. And I think we're starting to see a more tech-savvy client who wants those types of things and wants those kinds of services. As an industry, we have to ask ourselves, what's not working anymore about the previous model?
We are trying to reinvent the veterinary experience. We're focused on the human element of it, the pet owners themselves, and the care providers. For the engineering side, are the systems and tools that we have in place, are they simple? Are they easy to understand? Are they friendly? Are they aesthetically pleasing? There's so much that goes into being human. We're really diving into that experience. Claude is the nickname of our medical record system. It's a system that we built ourselves so that our doctors can read and write medical records.
We didn't get into this to do paperwork. We got into this to treat our patients. So we want to do a good job with those medical records, but as quickly and as efficiently as possible, and then go home and come back recharged and actually enjoy what we do.
I get asked, what is so different about Modern Animal? When you walk into a Modern Animal hospital, it's going to feel different to you than any other hospital you've ever been in. As important as that is, what is probably more important is what you do not see in the hospital. And that is the support of an in-house engineering team that spends time in our hospitals with our doctors.
The entire organization really takes care to hear our feedback. I've never worked in a place where the CEO talks to you or even just the hospital owner talks to you and says, yeah, this is everything that we heard that you need, let's change it.
Being able to say very easily and quickly, this would be easier for me if it worked in the following manner, and know that somebody's going to follow up on that and make that change. Nobody became a veterinarian so that they could spend a lot of time in front of a computer. And I think that's what our design team and our engineering team understands and is working every day to lessen that amount of interaction while still enabling the doctor to do their best medicine.
see that their main theme here is culture. It's mostly about specific management style, work-life balance, and so on. And also, you'll see it's very modern and very young. So I think they're doing a good job to say, well, this is our culture. Can you see yourself working here? If so, go ahead and apply. So you can see this is just a pic from the website, Meet Veterinary Care on Human Terms. Okay, so just two more. This is Vets Now, the emergency out-of-hours care provider here in the UK, and they've got their 10-week paid introduction program, which is the cutting edge. So they focus on mastery. And then for you guys there in the US, the VEG, Veterinary Emergency Group, again, also looking to transfer from general practice to emergency medicine. Again, they do the training. So they are focusing on mastery. Right, that's it. Thanks for listening.
Thanks so much, Aubrey. That was a super talk. We have had some questions submitted, including some questions submitted ahead of time from people that registered. One person asked that they say that they're redesigning their clinic's website. How should this potential veterinary candidate research impact that project, and how they manage that project, how they think about that project?
Okay, so this is all to do with employer branding. So you can't be everything to everyone. So this is a bit of a process. You need to do the research to try and figure out within culture, citizenship, and mastery, what is the thing you're going to hang your coat on? What is the thing you want to be absolutely famous for? It doesn't mean you that and only that, but it is like I just showed in those examples. So all of those folks, Pennard, for example, now you know Pennard, it's all about citizenship. So the two things that they are focusing on, and they got a lot of free press in Veterinary Times and all of those things, even the BBC. And that, I mean, that's amazing. If you don't pay for advertising, it's trusted more. So it is doing a bit of research. Ask people, for example, why did they choose you, and why are they staying? And if you ask those questions, have these conversations, you can sort of distill out what it is that you are famous for, and that is then you galvanize everybody under that banner, giving them the right words to use, and that's then how you design your jobs page on your website.
And so for sure, and in creating this employer brand, a good employer brand, I assume, is differentiated. Now, that means some people are going to like the brand, it's going to resonate with them, and some people it's not going to resonate with them. I imagine like a lot of people listening would be quite scared to alienate any portion of the potential candidate pool in what they see to be as a candidate, a talent short market, right? Any words of encouragement to help them find their bravery there, Aubrey?
Yes, now that's very important, what you just said, and it's also very typical. But if you choose the wrong person, or if the wrong person walks in through that door, 2 weeks later or a month later, they walk out the back door. So it is, who wrote this? So the guy's name is Brian Adams, not the Brian Adams. He is from PH Creative, I think. Now they a great employer brand agency. By the way, if I'm not mistaken, they did Veterinary Clinics of America, VCA's employer branding. But what he famously said is, repel the many, compel the few. Now, go and have a look, if you have time, at Modern Animals recruitment, advertising, and everything they say. You sort of, you'll select yourself in or select yourself out, and that's very good employer branding.
For sure, I've seen them set up like tattoo parlors at some of the veterinary events.
Yes, exactly.
I'm much too much of a wimp to get any ink done at a veterinary event, but you see they're very long queues with people up for it. So yeah, pretty cool. What are the early warning signs that an employee is entering their tolerance margin? You had that graph where you showed that there's the expectation and then there's a tolerance margin. How could people tell when someone is moving into that tolerance margin?
Well, unfortunately, it's difficult because it depends on how close you are, how often you interact, with these folks. What we don't seem to do is, so we're very keen on exit interviews for some reason, but doing stay interviews is still something that is not, happening often. Now, I'm not talking about 360 reviews and all these, key indicator management and whatever it is called today. I'm talking about having conversations again about what made you come and work for us, what is making you stay, and what would you like to see in the future. So, and when there's enthusiasm in that, you sort of know you're on the right track. But you start seeing this lack of enthusiasm. Well, other things for increased absenteeism, just being a little bit late, being a little bit slack. But these are all symptoms of disengagement at work. So, it honestly depends on how closely you observe the behavior every day of the folks who work for you. In big organizations, that becomes more difficult.
Yeah, for sure. And even in smaller teams, I've heard of clinic owners going into the clinic to multiple resignations and it catching them by surprise. And so I like this idea of a stay interview. I hadn't heard it put like that before, Aubrey, but that sounds like something definitely worth exploring. As if you have employees hanging out in this tolerance margin, it sounds like you're saying that erodes employer brand, right? That in terms of it's reputationally erosive, as if I interpret it right, that with a good reputation there is some tolerance there, but it doesn't last forever, right? And so I guess my question would be, are there ways you can earn that reputation back, and what are the right ways in which to do that? Any tips there?
Well, I think one of the first things to think about is whatever the employer brand is, or that perception out there, is that actually the correct one? Because there are two reasons. Firstly, so this expectation was completely wrong. And that's why these employees are in that zone of tolerance and then they leave. So you need to be sure that what you are offering and what you, how you want to form or mold your employer reputation out there. Because look, you can't own it. You can only mold it or sort of manage it. And to make sure that that is actually what it is. So again, it's all these little interviews, these staying interviews, making sure that you've got your finger on the button to try and figure out what's going on, and to know early so that you can change whatever it is, and then find out what the problem is, because something is causing that experience outside of the expectation. So where are you going wrong, and fix that. You've got these questionnaires of things to do now, things to do later, or things to stop and continue and change. Now these are important. How much time do we spend doing that? We spend so much time on things that we need to do right now that we forget to do the things that we must do to manage the practice well.
For sure. Okay, there's some questions coming in on the feed. One of them is, I have found offering work from home days to be attractive to potential employees, but this does make it harder to separate work life and home life. I think this is relating to your definition of work-life balance. I think it was, Aubrey, where you talked about not thinking about work at home and not thinking about home at work, or something along those lines. So if you are embracing flexible working and you're offering team members work from home day a week, any tips on how to get that balance right?
Look, not in our profit so much, but in banking and and so many different office jobs, people are spending lots of time working at home. I mean, there are companies that have still not, their employees still are not going back to the office. So it takes a bit of discipline and guidance on making sure that there is routine. So you start work at this time, you take a break at that time, and that you have a set time and also a set place where you do this job. And I think this flexibility is great. It gives us the opportunity to spend, and we are more productive at home. I mean, there's a lot of research that is coming out now that we are more productive at home. And there's a lot of things that we have to do in practice, and it's just admin work that we can actually do from home. We don't need to be in the practice to do that. So I hope that we we find a lot more of this. Also, Tom, I'm sure you know about this project that it was a global project about the the 38-hour week in 4 days or something like that. So instead of getting 40 hours, a 40-hour week into 4 days, you actually do the 38-hour week. So it gives you more flexibility, and that too was shown to increase the productivity of employees. So there's a lot of different ways of being flexible.
Sure. No, I appreciate that. That's really useful. Last one for you, Aubrey, because I know I think we've kept you past the hour, but we've got one more question for you. I like your idea of an offer video rather than an offer email. Is there a tool you recommend for doing that, and anything that you should include in there that you wouldn't include in an offer letter or vice versa?
Look, I don't have any tools, anything. There's only one thing that I'm going to say. One thing that's important is be authentic and be spontaneous. That's it. This is not something that needs to have a massive budget. Get somebody who's quite tech savvy with the iPhone, do this video, make it fun, or even the offer letter. Let everybody sign the offer letter, not just the employer. So there's a lot of ways of being creative, and that is stories being told. Do you know this offer letter? Look at this, everybody signed it. I feel so welcome. So many different ways of doing so. So just, it needs to be memorable. And the only way for things to be memorable is if you create an emotion. Without emotions, we don't remember.
Well, that's important to be authentic. That's great. Aubrey, for people that want to learn more, people that want to hear more from you, where should they go?
I think the easiest is going to be LinkedIn, or there I've got aubrey@guavavet.com there, so you can email me.
Perfect. Thanks so much for sharing your wisdom, your insight, your knowledge, your hard-earned experience. I learned a lot, and I hope everyone else did too. I hope you'll join us for our next installment of the PetsApp webinar series. You can find out when and where that is at petsapp.com/blog. If you'd like to learn more about PetsApp, get a demo with us, just head across to petsapp.com. Until next time, that's all from me, and thank you again, Aubrey.
Thanks. Awesome.
At PetsApp, we help you reduce missed calls and save you time by making your client communications more efficient. But we can't achieve that unless we get you where your pet owners are. We do this by providing you with a listing on the PetsApp website, providing you a widget on your website, and by providing both web and app versions of PetsApp through which your clients can communicate with you. But clients don't even have to download the app with the PetsApp's two-way SMS text chat feature. But then we surface all of this in one convenient location for you and your team on the PetsApp dashboard and in the PetsApp Veterinary team member app. This makes it super efficient for you to respond to chat messages via the web, your website, the app, and SMS text in just one location. In the same location, you can collaborate with team members, use template messages, and template media library files. All of this combined will reduce your missed calls by 85% and save the average connect 3 hours every single day while delivering exemplary customer service.
There's no place I'd rather be.